My name is George Kass. I was at Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941, when the Japanese attacked us. And I was aboard the USS San Francisco, a heavy cruiser. And before I begin, I'd like to relate to you a little family ha-ha. I want it on my tombstone. I want survivor of Pearl Harbor and 4 daughters. And when they were teenagers, that was tough. Thank goodness they all evolved into wonderful, loving daughters and mothers. And I was lucky that way. So, anything else you would like to know? I joined the Navy right out of high school at 18 years of August of 1940. I spent 6 years during the entire World War II and got out in August 1960. So that was the length of my service in the United States Navy. I ended up being discharged honorably as a gunner's mate first class. Well, I went to boot camp in Newport, Rhode Island. After that, I was transferred to Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, and I was assigned aboard the heavy cruiser San Francisco. I was at Pearl Harbor December 7th when they attacked Pearl Harbor. It was a peaceful, sunny day like it always had been. I was in the head, shaving up, getting ready to go on liberty. Our ship and a lot of other ships at that day, that weekend, a lot of the ships had skeleton crews aboard them. In other words, half their ship was aboard on liberties in Honolulu, and I was getting ready to go on liberty. And adjacent to us is Ford Island, an airstrip, a Navy airstrip. And there was always planes flying around Pearl Harbor all the time. And I'm in the head shaving, and I hear these planes. I think nothing of them. And all of a sudden we hear these tremendous explosions. And we run out on deck, and we look across the lagoon, the harbor, at Battleship Row, where a lot of the battleships, the capital ships, were moored there, and they were exploding, and we realized they were being bombed, and we said, "What in the world?" We were shocked. We were stunned. We couldn't. It took a while to even compromise what the heck was going on, and finally, one of the guys said, "They got orange balls on their planes." So one guy said, "Well, I think they're Japanese. What are those guys bombing us for? We done nothing to them. This is peacetime, And we just couldn't comprehend it. It was so mind-boggling that, we didn't know what to do. We had no ammunition aboard ship because we were due to go into dry dock and have our ship scaled, and they were replacing some of our sub-armory, our 3-inch guns for 1.1 and 40 millimeter guns, anti-aircraft guns. By the way, the San Francisco was a heavy cruiser. Their main battery was 8-inch guns, and I was assigned to a 5-inch anti-aircraft guns at the time. But anyway, we didn't know what to do. So finally, right across the dock from us, our sister ship, the New Orleans, was also in the same situation as us as far as skeleton crew. So we rushed over to them. I was on the 5-inch anti-aircraft gun, so we helped them man their anti-aircraft guns. And we started firing at the Jap planes. But we realized very shortly that our firing was very ineffectual, because down in the magazines where they were sending us ammunition up through the hoist to our gun sight, they were sending the wrong ammunition up. They were sending us up, instead of anti-aircraft ammunition, they were sending us up star shells. Star shells are one that are used for surface firing to illuminate the targets. They burst out up there and they come down in parachutes with a flare, and very ineffectual for any air. But that was I don't think much of the fleet, all the firing that went on, and it turned out to be eventually tremendous firing. I don't think much of our firing had much effect against the Japanese attack. There was a few planes, I understand, that did get off, 2 or 3 planes, and they did knock a few planes down, but it was mostly ineffectual. The whole thing was such a snafu, such a unexpected, unprepared situation that it was just unfathomable to us that it happened. Eventually, there was 2 waves of planes that came in. There was a slight lull in between the first wave and the second wave, and then that's probably when most of our firing started taking started. I think during the first wave, hardly any firing went on. But anyway, like I said, it was ineffectual probably, and it just I lost my train of thought, but anyway, we stayed at battle stations even after the attack was over. I mean, we stayed in battle stations even during the night. And any plane that came in, friendly or what, they soon found out to stay away from Pearl Harbor, because any planes that came over and we didn't know who they were, we started firing at them. And so it was that kind of a snafu, disorganized hullabaloo type of thing to us guys. My ship itself did not get any bombs, and we were safe from torpedo attack, being retired at the docks, but we did get strafed. And to my knowledge, there's nobody aboard our ship got injured, to my recollection. If you want to go further, about a week later, the aircraft carrier Saratoga and 4 of us cruisers and about 9 or 10 destroyers and some cruisers went on a task force, and we spent 74 days at sea, refueling at sea, what they call that, in the area of the Coral Sea, off of Australia, and that area. And eventually the Japs discovered us there, and they sent over our task force 16 bombers, and the Lieutenant O'Hare aboard a fighter plane pilot aboard the Saratoga, himself alone, shot down. All 16 planes were shot down, and none of our ships got hit by bombs. And Lieutenant O'Hare himself knocked down 5 planes himself. He came the war's first ace. When you get 5 planes shot down, you're considered an ace. Well, anyway, maybe a lot of people don't know this yet, but the airport in Chicago, O'Hare Airport, was named after Lieutenant O'Hare. So just a point of information. But to further my experiences, I later on was transferred and eventually got onto a fleet tanker. A fleet tanker is one, we used to travel with the task forces during the Battle of the Pacific, and whenever we had to attack these different Japanese islands in order to overtake them and get nearer and nearer and nearer to Japan. So during all those battles, and eventually, we got to Philippines, in Leyte Gulf, our fleet tanker, along with a bunch of other accompanying ships, mostly service ships, like transport ships, other tankers, supply ships, were anchored in Leyte Gulf. We took the Jap planes came over the mountain and put a torpedo into our tanker, and luckily they hit a fuel oil tank, not an aviation gas tank. If they had hit the aviation gas tank, I'm sure the ship would have exploded, and I don't think I would be here today. But it listed badly, and we didn't sink. It disabled us, but we didn't sink. It took us about 2 weeks, I would say 2 months, to eventually get back to the States to get repaired. And because of this big hole in us, we could only make about 3 or 4 knots. So it took all this time, maybe a short stop in Pearl Harbor on the way back to the States. They couldn't take us in for repairs in Pearl Harbor. There was too many other activities and other ships to be taken care of. So we had to go back to the States. And then I eventually got transferred off of that ship because of the repairs, and I was sent to Orange, Texas, where I was assigned aboard a brand new destroyer, a twin-mounted 5-inch guns destroyers. It had three mounts, 3 twin-inch mounts, and we put it in commission, went on a shakedown cruise, and eventually went through the canal and got onto the west coast, and we were preparing to go out and join the fleet. And in those days, then, the fleet was taking a big beating. With the kamikaze planes in those days, they sank more ships during those last months with the kamikaze planes than they did all during the war. And they were the scourge and the worry of most of our ships. But of course we would have survived all that, but it was a big danger. But fortunately for us, all of a sudden, they were dropping atomic bombs over Japan, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. What the heck is an atomic bomb? We didn't know, heard nothing about that. And finally we understood eventually what an atomic. Right after that, a couple of days later, after the second bomb went, the Japanese surrendered. So that was basically most of my experiences during the war. But during the war, when I got discharged, I received 6 ribbons and accompanying medals, and 8 battle engagement stars to accompany this. That was the extent mostly of my Navy experiences.
Tell me a little bit about Leyte Gulf. Leyte Gulf.
Leyte Gulf?
Yeah.
Well, when we got close enough, you got that on now?
Yeah, hang on one second. Let me double check on something.
Yeah, hello.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, when we got near the Philippines, most of the battle wagons and cruisers and destroyers went north a little bit, and they got an engagement that night. But that evening, our accompanying surface ships, supply ships and so forth, were anchored in Leyte Gulf. And during the night, the evening, I should say, before it really got dark, the Japs had sent over some planes into Leyte Gulf, and one of them put a torpedo into my fleet tanker. And luckily, they hit a fuel oil tank and not an aviation gas tank. If they had hit the aviation gas tank, I'm sure we would have sunk right away. It exploded, but it put this big hole in us. I thought we were going to capsize the way it was listing, but eventually they transferred enough fuel oil to equalize the ship, and we alighted and we were okay. And we eventually transferred all our fuel off of the ship to other ships, but we had this big hole in us. It took us maybe 2 months. Eventually, we could only make 3 or 4 knots because of this big hole in us, so we couldn't travel very fast. It took us, by the time we stopped in Pearl Harbor momentarily, and then go on to the States to refurbish, for repairs. I then got transferred. And did I tell you then I got transferred to the cross country to the Orange, Texas, and I recommissioned a new destroyer. Well, when we were in the West Coast, preparing to go out to join the fleet again on the destroyer, naturally there was an anguish about joining the fleet, facing these kamikaze planes, because like I said, those last months of the war, the Japanese sank more of our ships with the kamikaze planes. By kamikazes are suicide planes that are loaded with gasoline and bombs, and they would purposefully commit suicide by running in, if they were able to avoid the anti-aircraft carrier. A lot of them didn't, but a lot of them got through and sank a lot of our ships.
And can you tell me about stories that you saw of people and how people were reacting, this type of thing?
Well, when we ran out on deck, when we heard all these explosions, and we saw Battleship Row being attacked and bombed, and eventually there was so much smoke there you could hardly make out the ships themselves. But we eventually realized afterwards that all our battleships had been sunk, and we were stunned. We couldn't believe what was happening to us. It was so shocking. This was, after all, a peaceful, balmy Pearl Harbor, beautiful. I'd spent a year there almost in Pearl Harbor, going on Liberty, enjoying. It was peaceful, just plain like it is today, peaceful. There was no. I know there was a war over in Europe, but that had nothing to do with us. We were sort of an isolationist country in those days, I think, and we were so far away from any kind of war that over there in Pearl Harbor that we couldn't imagine who the heck. It can't be the Germans attacking us. Who the heck were these people? What were they doing? Why were they attacking us? We were peace with everybody. It was shocking. It was so shocking, even during the night, thinking about what had happened, and all, during the battle, even during the battle, some of the boats, we didn't have, keep in mind that warships do not carry lifeboats. They, like cruise ships do. If you get sunk, you either got a life vest or maybe a floating, blown up float. But none of them had real lifeboats. But there were a lot of lifeboats around from the shore and other facilities for transportation. So a lot of these boats went over towards Battleship Row and were pulling these poor sailors out of the water. This floating water was, half of it was on fire because of the oil. And there's so many stories about people being pulled out of there that were done for, and it was so shocking that during an evening, night, after the battle, we sat at our gun stations trying to evaluate and think about what all went on during the day, and we were shivering from the thought of what happened to us. It's hard to come out and say exactly what was in our mind, but we knew our lives were changed, that we were in war now, and it was something that that we just can't recover in a few days just to think about it. But I must tell you one thing too also. Right after the war, there was a censorship program put up. They did not want the world to know exactly what ships and what ships how many had been sunk and so forth. So we were not allowed to write for 2 weeks at least. And finally, after about 2 weeks, they gave us postcards. And all we could do was sign the postcard saying that we were well and we had not been injured. And about, I guess it must have taken 2 to 3 weeks maybe before my mom and dad, excuse me, I get emotional just thinking about it. Before my mom and dad realized I was safe. And I get emotional just thinking about the anguish that they must have went through. I realized, and they knew I was in Pearl Harbor, that they must have went through. So I guess anyway, I think I'm lucky in my lifetime anyway. I had a father who was in World War I. He fought in France, in Germany. He was wounded over there. I have his picture in uniform, and I have 3 brothers and myself in our uniforms on my wall in my bedroom, all in uniform. And they served during World War II also. And my young daughter, my young sister, the youngest of the family, there were 5 of us. I think my mom and dad quit after the girl came. Maybe they were, after 4 boys were still hoping for a girl, I guess, and they quit after that. Anyway, my young daughter, my young sister, saw us boys up there, and my dad, her dad, up there on the wall. She wanted to be up there with us. So she dug up a picture of her when she was about 7 years old or so, something that she had a little Navy type of shirt and skirt on. So she's up there with us now too.